Hello, my name is Thomas Carcelli, and today I'll be discussing my Essay 3 and what it's about. So, the first thing I want to discuss is what, Essay 3 was about. Essay 3 what is the ethical obligation, or what's a position, or an ethical position to take that higher education has in relation to formal or informal job training? At first, I didn't really understand this, so I broke it down a little bit in my interpretation. It's what do universities essentially have to do, considering that students are spending lots of money, lots of time into their programs? So what do the universities ethically have to provide, not that they're obligated to, but ethically have to provide to students in relation to formal or informal job training? So to plan for this paper actually took quite a bit of time, because I really like to put a lot of emphasis on the planning aspect before I get into the actual writing and the researching, because I think if you're sporadic about the process, ultimately it just leads to taking longer. So even though it doesn't seem necessarily as efficient, because you're kind of just spending a lot of time jotting down ideas and such, but by doing so, you get to focus your research and your writing and your planning a lot more effectively, which will ultimately in the long run save you hours depending on time. So I really started thinking and writing stuff down, reading, and that's when I came to the consensus of my idea, that I thought that informal and formal job training alike, or together, woven, not separated, was the best. And a lot of this came actually from just my own personal experiences. When I was sort of thinking as an engineer, someone that has participated in a lot of informal activities, because obviously all of the students are part of a formal program. These programs that were informal generated a lot of important skills that I'm going to need in a more professional environment. And it's not to say that these skills I can translate everywhere, but I felt that these skills were super important to the job, and because it's actually what I'm going to be doing. And the reason why I liked it and why I decided they need to be woven together and not separated in formal job training is because I felt the same way about formal education, reflecting on some of the classes that I didn't really like to take. Some of my Englishes that I had to take for the honors college. It was a pretty infamous class for the most part for most students. I didn't want to take it. I took it. I actually really enjoyed it. The way I thought in English just transcended everything I thought it would ever be. So it was definitely an enlightening experience. So I didn't feel like one or the other should be taken as precedent. So that's the reason why I ended up ultimately choosing that idea, and that was all the planning I did. So once I figured that out, I then got to researching, trying to look for more so the extremes, people that believed that formal job training alone or informal job training alone was better without the other, because this way I could see the strong argument, find some holes in that, and then build to my idea. That way I could write an effective paper. So one of the researches I found was from Dr. Haney, and Dr. Haney was on the side of that informal job training experiences are the most important, because formal job training experiences limit students' abilities to get professional exposure, and thus when they go into the real world, they're limited in their abilities. So Dr. Haney was essentially the ethical values or the ethical problem that universities weren't giving students is that sure, they were preparing them to be, say, well-rounded individuals and have skills that would be beneficial to their degrees and ultimately to their jobs. They didn't have any skills, and they were getting ran over, and they weren't being able to apply what they've known because they weren't getting any informal job training experience. So that was essentially the take that Dr. Haney was trying to get about. The next research I use is from Dr. Brian Bridges. Dr. Brian Bridges was actually the exact opposite of Dr. Haney. So Dr. Brian Bridges believed formal job training is an irreplaceable experience, because not only does it teach you important technical skills, but it also creates good, well-rounded individuals that ultimately become successful in the workplace. So what Dr. Brian Bridges was really arguing is that informal job training experiences are very technical. They're going to teach you what you need to know for that company or for that workplace, and you're going to be good at that, but it limits your critical thinking and development, and it doesn't allow you to find yourself as an individual. Say when you go to university, you get the chance to explore your major, but you can always switch. So what he's saying is it gives students a lot of exposure to figure out what they want and grow as individuals, and take classes such as English, which I had said was initially one of my thoughts that led me to not want to discredit formal job training that develops critical thinking that is irreplaceable in a constantly changing world. So he thinks informal job training is important, but it's almost very robotic and creates human-like machines, whereas formal job training does foster a lot of important traits, and it allows individuals to be well-rounded and adapt to a world and jobs that are constantly changing. Another resource that I want to quickly touch base with that I'll sort of talk about more so in the findings is an article by Judson King. So I included this as well in my essay. And the reason why it was so important is because it was one of the findings that I really needed to solidify my idea and kind of understand my argument. So in this article by Judson King called Let Engineers Go to College, the title can be a bit misleading if you read it at face value. What it means by let engineers go to college is not that you should actually let engineers go to college in the literal sense, because you can't really be an engineer if you don't go to college unless you're just some bizarre super wizard. So every engineer needs a degree. So what he's really criticizing is he believes that engineering colleges that focus too heavily on informal education are ruining engineering students. So kind of similar to the earlier paper about formal or why formal education is important. But he's saying, you got to let engineers go to college and actually experience college, and you can't focus too much on technical skills because you're not developing the roundedness and adaptability that they should be gaining from college. So this is one of the articles so he doesn't directly discuss that he believes engineers or students should get a formal and informal education, but thus criticizes engineering education that focuses too much on informal education. And this really allowed me to open my eyes and solidify my argument of why I believe that there needs to be a balance between formal and informal education. Because as an engineering student myself, I could see this in my own experience. So now that I had both a very strong source for informal and formal job training, this was very important not only to add into my essay or to include in my essay resources that are showing the different sides, but more importantly, how it would be woven and express why my argument or the ethical value of my argument sort of tackles the problems with both. Definitely in my essay, I probably should have touched base a little more with my point of view in the beginning, sort of filtering it in to sort of lead up to the part where I just definitively talk about my situation instead of just mere summarizing. But the importance of those is, as I previously discussed, that they both had problems, and the problems were it couldn't tackle everything. The formal job training developed individuals, but it didn't prepare them as crucially and beneficially as informal job training experiences. But informal job training experiences didn't harbor enough critical thinking, adaptability. So by adding these two together, this was like my idea that universities should foster collaboration between the two, with universities being the formal job training, but also not straying away from informal job training. So with all the resources and findings and articles that I collected, I was able to come to the consensus that I still wanted to go along the path that informal and formal job training shouldn't be separated, and that they needed to be collaborated to create the most successful individual. But then came to the most consensus that universities need to foster this by providing opportunities for these informal experiences by their own efforts. And although universities do this currently, not every university does it. I think at the University of Houston, we're so blessed to have such a big university with a great alumni and such. So we are so used to it, but for the smaller universities, even junior colleges don't have these opportunities, which is where a lot of people get an education. So that was sort of my big emphasis, is that, or my conclusions on the idea, which is that universities need to foster these collaborations by putting in their own efforts. And this is really the ethical part. Sure, they don't have to, but ethically, since universities are giving students education, and most students are getting an education to eventually get a job, they can't say, okay, I'll give you the degree, but I'm not going to help you get the job, because ethically that wouldn't make much sense. So that was my conclusions or my findings, and ultimately my ideas did not change from the beginning. My opinions didn't really change from the beginning either, but this is not to say that they weren't adjusted quite a bit. I knew that I wanted to do formal and informal, not separated. I wanted them to be together, but I never knew how I wanted it to be. And I think Judson King's article
which is why I really want to talk about in my findings, was one of the very important articles and resources that I found, because it opened my eyes into engineering, which is something that I'm involved in, and allowed me to reflect quite a bit. And that's whenever I was able to come to the decision that universities need to foster this collaboration, because there's really no other way to incorporate informal experience for students that want to pursue formal without universities' help. Because even my own experiences, if it weren't for things like career fairs and such, I wouldn't really know where to go. It would take a lot of effort on my part on top of what I'm already doing for school. So that was definitely the article that helped me do it. So my opinions didn't necessarily change. Hope you enjoyed my essay. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good one.